Hello, this is Joy Hancox of the Byrom collections, and this is video 12, and I have something that I need to talk about to you rather urgently today. If you have not watched any of the videos before, you may choose to reflect on some of them after you've watched this particular video and catch up and see that they're stepping stones along the way of my journey through my professional researches. Now, as for this particular video, I want to concentrate on the crop circle syndrome. And I have to say that this is a journey that I did not expect to have to follow, and it was quite new to me, and you will see along this video that I am struggling in some ways to find an answer to something that is a mystery to us all. I'm going to start with a telephone call that I had from an American consultant who you will see, if you choose to look at my previous videos, is referred to as the carpenter. I had a phone call from him in September 2020. And this was at the time when we were supposedly having to plan for a first visit to the UK from him to discuss my work. And this was as a result of a program that he had seen, which was Forbidden History. And this was in 2013, and he had seen it in America in 2016. In that program, I was showing and demonstrating how I had been able to design from the Byrom collection geometric drawings the Globe Theatre as produced in and made in 1599. And he had obviously become so interested in it that he wanted to get in touch with me about the geometry especially. And this phone call that he was making in 2020 to me, it was to plan for a visit to the UK to discuss the geometry that was contained within the geometry of the Byrom collection drawings. Of course, behind all that was the philosophy that was really responsible for the geometry in the first place. He had made sure that a gift that he wanted me to have, which was a summary of his own creation, and was based in a frame of 9, I call them windows, but they weren't windows really. They were a feature of 9 geometric drawings placed in little windows 3, 6, 9. And he wanted me to have that. It was a summary of his own creation of philosophy and spiritual thinking at that time. And he wanted me to have it because it reflected some of the features in the geometric drawings. Having received that, and I'd had it for some little while before he made this phone call to arrange a tentative visit to the UK. And I had noticed that in one of those little frames, it seemed to reflect a recent rendering of a crop circle in the south of England that I had been drawn, it had been drawn to my attention. And so I asked him on the phone if he had got something to do with the creation of crop circles, because it seemed to be connected with his conversation to me on the phone. And he hesitated and did not reply spontaneously. It wasn't as it was a general response, but later that day he did send me an email which was more detailed than his answer on the phone, and I have included that in the messenger, my publication of the messenger book. But I've already quoted it in video 8, but we're now in video 12, and so I'm going to take the liberty to read that as it was included in my book. And what he had said to me, and I'm reading it here as it was published in my book, he was saying that, and had said to me, that that there was an alien race and that they were speaking to me directly because I understood the mathematics. I could not understand that, not really. And so this is why I'm reading the actual quote from his email that he actually wrote to me. And I'm quoting this now, they have spoken to me, and now they speak to you, as you know. I am an emissary, as I have said. I'm interrupting what I'm saying now because an emissary is a spokesman for somebody else. And I'm returning now to my reading. I am an emissary, as I have said, a fledgling blue in the world of aliens. I had to learn galactic, and to you they speak in symbolic logic right down to your geometrical alley. To top it all off, they know exactly what to say at exactly the right time, in exactly the right place for you to take notice. You've noticed it yourself. To know that you personally are being directly addressed by a real-life alien race. Was absolutely speechless when I read that. And I thought to myself, who is this carpenter? Speaking from across the pond in the United States. And now, after all this time, this was in 2020, September, and we're now in 2025. And I'm talking to you in October 2025, 5 years after this conversation, and quote later in my book. And as I have said to you, at this time, at the time of receiving all this, I was absolutely, I can only use the word flabbergasted, because I could not associate and identify myself with that kind of honour, if you like. And I'm saying that now, today. But I made a pledge to myself secretly that I would check on that as far as I could and see whether there was any factual logic that I could apply to myself on my journey in the crop circle world. When the carpenter watched the film in 2016 in America, he said that he immediately recognized me because of the way that I was interpreting the geometry that I was using in the design, as I saw it, for the Elizabethan theatre, the Globe. And this design was really to do with the 1599 Elizabethan theatre. He also said that he saw that I recognized the code. And I understand, and I'm telling you this as the viewer, I did not realize that there was a code that I had recognized at all. It was simply a method that I had used to understand the geometric drawings. This was 2020, and we're now in 2025, and I have spent the 5 years investigating the crop circle syndrome as it has appeared in the UK in the south of England. And because I wanted to be able to view the whole thing with common sense and practical ability, I checked every single one as it appeared. And I have to say, as a summary, that I've changed my views now. I understand what the code is, and I understand that I am in some way very privileged to have the ability to do that and to have the wherewithal and the collection with which to work. So now we have to go back to the 5 years between 2020 and 2025, because during that time, through the study of the crop circle program as it developed, crop circle by crop circle over the years, which I studied in great detail, I realized that the code that the carpenter was talking about was reflected in those crop circles, which I had already identified unknowingly and unwittingly through my interpretation of the geometric drawings in the design of the Globe Theatre. And because I recognized the understanding that I had built over the years since 2020, and the carpenter was part of all that, because the crop circles that I am going to talk about were as a result and after a phone call or a communication from him, the carpenter. And now I feel able and, if you like, almost qualified to look at the picture of 9 geometric drawings, which has a title, The Ascension of Man, and I feel as though I am worthy and capable of reflecting what I think that the carpenter was wanting to say and was intending to say and wanting to reflect in his picture that he called The Ascension of Man. Each picture was given a title, and as I understand it, in each of those windows he gives a quality of humanity that is moving towards what he considers to be wholesome and reflective of the nature of God. And collectively, those add up to, if you like, the perfection of the soul of man in his ascension as a member of the universe. And I am not going to give those individual words that the carpenter allocated to those windows. That is absolutely unique to him. But I can assume, and I have assumed, that the collective interpretation of that a study of the ascension of man towards his wholesome and spiritual connection with God. It becomes a meeting of feelings, thought with spirit. Amongst its features in the geometry of one of these geometric drawings, I will say that there seems to me to be a figure of E.T. And perhaps that's an extraterrestrial, yet also a symbol of something greater. And that is what I think that Carpenter meant when he introduced that figure superimposed on the geometric drawing. And it, to me, I think I'm reflecting what he would say was the mystery of our shared existence and the vastness of creation itself. In each of the 9 frames, he gives a word that is a description of the development of man through his maturity and wholesomeness towards perfection. In addition to all those words, we have separately, and this is what Carpenter made absolutely clear, the words, I am me, you are me, we is one. They speak of unity, not in a physical sense, but in the spiritual unity that creates love, which is a binding influence for all beings. It reminds us that we are part of one great whole, bound by spirit and the light of understanding. And being a teacher by profession, I was wondering how young people and school children would understand that. And I was thinking about what everybody knows, I think, and all young people know, is the Wizard of Oz. Because Dorothy, here's she following the yellow brick road, and she's got Tin Man and Lion and, the Scarecrow with her. I think she's on a journey towards perfection herself on the yellow brick road. And so, if you like, if young people would think about that as they read my interpretation of what the carpenter meant in his piece, then maybe they will understand and take it a little bit more to heart, because that story is magical for everybody, and it's a regular for people to watch at Christmas. And anyway, there we are. I have to now recount another startling event, and I think it is startling because, the viewer will see for themselves. I had a phone call from the carpenter, and he was not given to be ringing me here, there and everywhere. In fact, I did not hear from him by phone very much at all. But I did have this phone call about the beginning of June, let's say the beginning of June. And he said to me, and this was his purpose of ringing, he asked me if there had been any crop circles appearing in the south of England. And I had to tell him that no, I was able to tell him that there had been no crop circles that season. And so with that he said to me, well, will you let me know when the first one appears, please? And so I thought, well, of course, I will do that. And then a couple of days later, 2 or 3 days later, actually on the 12th of June 2024, a crop circle appeared called Windmill Crop Circle, and it was situated at the side and very close to the Pembroke estate again. And what I did not register immediately was the date of the commemorative date of the opening of the new globe, Sam Wanamaker's globe, 20-sided, in London in 1997. And of course, I was present at that opening. And here we have the first crop circle of the season appearing on that same commemorative date. And I have to say that it was the carpenter's phone call that seemed to come ahead of that crop circle appearing. Now, I do not recall ever discussing that opening date. I discussed the globe, but I did not discuss the actual date of that appearance. And so, in a way, it seemed as though the carpenter was heralding the appearance of that first crop circle of the season on that commemorative date. And I thought, rightly or wrongly, that it was a message to me. And that was the essence of the actual interpretation of the message that the carpenter had sent to me in an email in 2020. And so, to me, there was a link in all this, and it was something I interpreted it as from some source that was above nature. Well, it was to do with nature, but I could not account for it at that time. Now, a few days later than that, only a few days later, the bush barrow crop circle appeared within the vicinity of Stonehenge as well. And when that bush barrow crop circle appeared, I looked into it very carefully about the history that was surrounding that area and any scientific discussion that there'd been about those barrows. And it seemed that science and scientists and other people qualified to do so had examined the history of those barrows. The bush barrow group were very close to the latest crop circle that I had identified, and of course, because of that, I was very interested in the contents of the bush barrow skeletons. My only comment about the bush barrow skeletons is that one of them, and I've talked about this in the previous video, so I'm not going to elaborate on that. If it's sufficient for me to say that it had a breastplate of gold, and on it was a frame of 9 sections, the same as the numerology positions of the carpenter's ascent of man. And so I could not ignore that, and I was very, very startled to see it, because it seemed to me that there was a message here connecting all of this, the skeleton's barrow and the Pembroke windmill and the messenger book message that I had quoted from the telephone call of the carpenter. And actually, I really think that this is worthy of note, because it means that there is something going on that is a force that is above us all. And I was determined to note that, and I'm noting it now for the viewer, because it is part of the story that prompted me to think that everything that I was doing was worthy of exploring. And I'm repeating that. Through my studies of the 5 years of study into crop circles, I had learned that some very distinguished families had lived in that area. And I knew that Siegfried Sassoon, the philosopher, poet and author, had lived in Hainsbury House in Wiltshire during the First World War, and he had a son called George Sassoon. And when I was looking into the details of that family, I recognised, to my surprise, that George Sassoon, the son, had written 3 books. 2 of them were to do with the Kabbalah and the Manna Machine. And when I saw that, I wanted to know about them, the books. And it was very, very difficult to trace them, but I did manage to acquire 2 of them, and they've appeared as books in my previous video. So I won't repeat that now, except to say that I acquired 2 of them, and in fact eventually I got the 3rd one, which was to do with the radio and coding within the radio synopsis. And so I had been talking about the Manna Machine and George Sassoon and Wiltshire, and connecting it up with the Globe Theatre, the Tiring House and the Ark of the Covenant. All that had been already discussed. And then suddenly on the 15th of May there was a new crop circle appeared, and when I looked into it, it was near the Sutton Venie. You see, I'd never heard of that village before, and when I looked it up, I discovered that George Sassoon had lived there. And here we are, looking at a crop circle near the village where George Sassoon had moved to. He'd moved there apparently in his senior years, and after he'd published these books. So here was George Sassoon living in Sutton Veny, a village that I'd never heard of, and here he was living there, and a crop circle had appeared close by on the 15th of May, after my previous video when I'd been talking about his book. I felt it was absolutely meant for me, and I thought that somebody was giving me a twinkle in the eye and reminding me that I'd been listened to and watched from somewhere else. I was absolutely astounded. And so that made me think that, again, somebody seemed to be monitoring what I was doing. And it seemed to me that it was a silent gesture to indicate that whatever I was doing, there was some implicit message there. And, well, I took it as that anyway. The remarkable thing is, or I think it's a story worth repeating, because it was telling me something which I'm quite prepared to share with you today, to show the, if you like, the innocence with which some of this work was being carried out, because it was. Now, in my home, I have to say, with all these videos, there have been papers here and papers there and papers all over the place, and I would not return them to their proper site in case I needed to use them as a reference for some reason. And so on this occasion, after this video had appeared and I had been quietly bemused, if not concerned, about this George Sassoon crop circle appearing in Sutton Veny, in my home I have a person that I will refer to him economically as the clerk of works. And because of my untidy spaces where papers and books were littered about, I thought they were, I felt as though I wanted to get some order in my home. And so I had been looking into a filing cabinet to find spaces for some valuable papers that I wanted to store. And actually, in this filing cabinet were 2 boxes of archaeological samples from work that I had carried out in Tinton at St Michael's Church. And they were all carefully labelled from the time when they'd been done, and that is why they were in the filing cabinet. And I decided that I wanted a space in my filing cabinet for some important papers, and so I wanted the boxes removed. And I decided where I wanted them placing, which was in another room where I store papers, but it was on a very, very high shelf. And on this particular day, I asked David, officially I will term him as the clerk of works, I asked him if he would put these boxes on the very top shelf of a room that I used as a study, another study. So he gladly agreed to do that, but there were 2 file boxes in the place where I wanted these boxes, and I could not remember what those file boxes were. But anyway, David put these boxes on the top shelf, and he removed the file boxes for me to look at, because I hadn't looked at them for years. I did not even remember what was in them. And one of the boxes contained papers to do with the research that I did into the tunnels of Manchester. And then the second box was, would you believe it, the papers to do with my Shugborough visit, where I met Richard Lee and Michael Bagent. And I thought, well, the label on the front was such that I could see what it was, but I had not looked at it for years and years and years. And so I thought, well, I'd better look at this then. I've been talking about Shugborough, and I opened the box, and there was a file in it, and it started with all the papers to do with the bookings and everything to do with that visit. And then I came to a letter, and I could not believe what I was looking at. The date was 1984, that was 40 years ago, and it was signed by George Sassoon. And when I looked at it, he was thanking me for showing him some of the Byrom papers. I could not even remember that he was there. I did not associate him when I was looking at the quoting from the Manor Machine. I did not identify him as the same person that I was looking at a letter that he'd written to me in 1984. Now, do you know, I showed it to David, and he, of course, didn't associate it with the same sort of thing, because I didn't even know him either at the time. But on reflection, what can we think about that? It's not just a question of me forgetting whom I met. The point was, when I described the meeting, as I have done in an earlier video, it was a question of me reporting that Richard Lee asked me for my address. And I have discussed that and talked in a previous video about that. But of course, there were people in attendance with this conference, along with I was only a member of the audience, and there were people that came to talk to me, but I did not associate any of them with the same sort of significance as I did Richard Lee. So may I be forgiven for having met George Sassoon and him having written to me to say how interested he was in seeing the Byrom collection, some of them. But when I think about it, it was as though I was prompted by something or someone to get that file box down and look at it. And it was 40 years after, 40 years backwards. It takes us to 1984. And I think it was when I said in my previous video that I thought that somebody was talking to me and reminding me about the George Sassoon connection. Well, not connection, but they were, in a way, reminding me or connecting me with the letter that I'd had from 40 years before. And I think that was meant. I think this is part of the story. And I think somebody was giving me the wink, and dare I say that, I'm not being flippant, but it was so remarkable that I've chosen to tell you that story as happened in my daily life. George Sassoon has become a very important figure in all of this, because I did not know that I had met him, and here he is 40 years later appearing through the crop circle. And of course he has insisted, I think, or spiritually insisted, or somebody on his behalf has insisted, that I am drawn to his attention at this time because of the Manna Machine, but then in connection with the Ark of the Covenant, which is definitely part of the construction of the globe that is 20-sided. I think it should be 8-sided, and also that the tiring house reflects the Ark of the Covenant, the 10 Commandments, of which George Sassoon has included in his Manna Machine. And I think all these connections have been noted somewhere spiritual, and I think he's giving me the nod. So George Sassoon has become a part of almost my team of reflection, because he was responsible for the Manna Machine, and the Manna Machine included the Ark of the Covenant, of which I had noted earlier, much earlier, many years earlier, that the tiring house was based on the Ark of the Covenant for 1599 design, of which I had constructed a model based on the drawings that fitted into all of that as an 8-sided building, not a 20-sided. And so now, having given the two stories, little stories, you will realize that I've been recording and been making a note and studying every crop circle that appeared since 2020. And we're now towards the end of 2025, and I'm now returning to the first video, because in that first video I was able to show that a crop circle appeared around that time that was adjacent to the 3rd Earl of Pembroke's mansion again, and yet here we have a 9-pointed star in its construction. And I knew as soon as I saw it that I had in my first book piece that had been recorded by Professor Emeritus Lawrence Goddard, because he was the retired professor of mathematics from Salford University, and I had consulted him about the Byrom collection of drawings. And during his study of those drawings, he came across a 9-pointed star, and he said to me very clearly that he did not know how that had been created. So here we have a 9-pointed star in a rather complicated position, because in fact there were 3 9-pointed stars in its creation. Having seen that and remembered what Professor Goddard said to me, I wondered how on earth some creator was able to create it in a field. And so I'm showing the extract that Professor Goddard wrote for my book, The Byrom Collection. And we're also showing the 9-pointed star as it appeared in the Byrom collection, and it was used on the back cover of that published book. And we're showing all those features today, because how is it that something or some force was able to create that? And I'm choosing that to demonstrate how in the crop circles syndrome there is some force that is demonstrating the impossibility. And I don't think that that's natural. And you could say that it was not created by those people that are capable and have been known to create crop circles artificially by a board and some kind of implement that they use in the fields. I don't think that that is possible at all. I feel very privileged to have been able to talk to you about all of this, and this is my final words today about the collection of videos that we've assembled since from 1 to 12. We began with number 1 for Easter in 2024, and now we're approaching Christmas 2025, and so there will be no more crop circles for this season until 2026. And so I think it is appropriate that I should give a summary of the findings thus far, so far as the crop circle syndrome is concerned. I have very carefully selected those examples that we've seen, that you've seen today, based on the certainty that I feel, I must say, is suggesting that there is some other force besides those who choose to invent crop circles in fields of farmers. And we've concentrated in the south of England area, and each of those stories that I've recounted today is an example of what I feel is a certainty of another force superior to the man-made efforts of any skill that can be used on Earth. I think that there is a suggestion that there is some other force superior and far in excess of any capability that man can produce. And if we talk about AI, the wonder of the world is accounting for AI in any form that they choose to speak. But I think AI is something that we've got to be very, very watchful of, because already they're using robotic AI species for jobs to replace man-made skills, and this is, whilst it's very, very excellent in some ways, and we are learning how to depend on the answers that AI can give us in all kinds of ways, we've got to be very, very wary, because humanity has a soul, and this is something that is absolutely spiritual and unique to mankind. And now we are questioning whether our AI can almost replace the spiritual soul of the universe, and that can be very dangerous. And now for this final part of my video, can I just use a factual occasion when I was sent a present by Carpenter. He was not present at the launch of the Messenger book, but at the beginning of the following year, in 2022, he sent me a present, and it was a trinket really, and with a card, and it was from Roswell. The wording on the card from Carpenter demonstrates that it was something that he thought I might be glad to have. But actually, in doing that, in sending it to me, it sent a message to me, because in a way, although he wishes to use the word Carpenter for his name, I know that his background and heritage was very much part of the area of the Roswell disclosures. And what we're talking about with Roswell is that in 1947 there was supposed to be, and is said to have been, UFO landing, and exactly the result of that landing, there has been a reopening of the circumstances of that. And I have not got those kind of details, so it's not necessary for me to interpret that. My final word is about the Carpenter. As an emissary, in his own words, that is how he described himself. But for me, he is the ringmaster of my coverage of the crop circle syndrome to 2025. I have to thank everybody that has been part of my inquiries thus far. To the viewer, thank you for the viewing, that you've spent time watching my videos, and simply I would say, as far as I'm concerned, it has been a truth, and I feel privileged to be being able to speak to you like this, and all I can say is make of it what you will.